All right, greetings from the dark continent. Conscious Caracal here, or Adams van Sail, here to shine a light on the goings-on down south. And tonight I'm going to be reading and analyzing a phenomenal piece of investigative journalism that came out just recently, just last week. It's called The Information War Against AfriForum, and it's published on the phenomenal website called Politicsweb, and it's written by investigative journalist Marie-Louise Antoni, and it was published on the 7th of March. And it details specifically how a media-stoked frenzy emboldened the South African state to pursue treason charges against the Solidarity movement's leaders. The Solidarity movement, in this case, are well, I'm just thinking the shortest way to sum it up for maybe my international listeners. The best way to sum it up would be the Afrikaner organizations that in this case are heavily critical of the government for wanting to expropriate their property without compensation. So let's start off right away. Let me just make sure all my links and everything are out. Yes, it seems like they are. Let me just make sure everyone knows that I'm live. I always forget to do that. All right. And then presenting the screen, if you can just give me 1 second. Let's see if this works. There we go. Share. That looks good. Let me just make sure. No. You don't have to see me that well. Yeah, I don't really add anything to the content. So I think that's I think that's better. So you can read along if you want. All right. I'll figure out how to make my little screen a little bit bigger in the future. I mean, let's put it that way. Kale Rocks, good friend of mine in the chat, says watching this on my lunch break. Thank you very much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Right. So read along with me, please. The Information War Against AfriForum by Marie-Louise Antoni. When President Cyril Ramaphosa signed the Expropriation Act into law, the unhappiness among South Africa's political class was near universal. The country's news outlets ran stories about the ensuing contestations in a deluge of articles that spoke about the heated debate over the divisive and controversial law. The coalition government teetered on the brink as tensions erupted. There were rifts, and I'm just emphasizing what's being put into quotation marks here. I continue. There were clashes. The fallout was threatening instability, and legal battles loomed. Internationally, the press called a spade a spade. The phrase controversial land seizure law, rather than the more sanitized expropriation legislation, featured in headlines across the political spectrum from Fox News to BBC. Back home, the African National Congress, ANC, warmly welcomed this legislative adventurism, calling it a bold step to advance the party's transformative agenda. Now, just a little heads up. The term transformation or transformative to describe a policy in South Africa is an ideologically loaded term that the ANC uses. It's one of those flowery words that actually mean something quite sinister. So transformation is just a euphemism for the ANC's race agenda, where every facet of society needs to be perfectly match their race criteria. It's pretty much a euphemism for racially discriminatory policies, because that's the means that you need to employ to create this racial social engineering project of the ANC. So anywhere where transformation is used, just substitute it in your mind for racially discriminatory policies. I continue. The land, they said, could finally be shared among those who work it. Smaller parties like the Pan-Africanist Congress, PAC, and the South African Communist Party, SACP, also approved, the latter hailing it as a revolutionary step. Rise and Mzansi, meanwhile, saw no threat to private property rights if the law were to be correctly applied. Others threatened legal action. The Freedom Front Plus, for instance, complained the law had been steamrolled through Parliament and the president had failed to consult his coalition partners before signing it. The Patriotic Alliance concurred. The president had disrespected his partners and This is no way to treat us. We didn't even have a courtesy call. He didn't even have the courtesy to call us, said said Gayton McKenzie. Ramaphosa, he added, has stabbed us in the back. Action SA, meanwhile, believed this was yet another example of the ANC's relentless push for destructive policies. They slammed the coalition partners for being enablers of failed ANC policies and decried their ongoing capitulation on matters that threaten the future of South Africa. The party said, and I quote from them, "From the dangerously flawed National Health Insurance NHI scheme to the implementation of the controversial Bella Act, the continued entrenchment of failed BBBEE policies, broad-based Black economic empowerment, racially discriminatory policies," again, flowery language. We have to do everything in our power not to name it what it is. Racially discriminatory policies, name it redress, Black economic empowerment, transformation, affirmative action, all these beautiful terms. Just don't call it racially discriminatory policies, because that would be accurate and upset people. And I continue. And the expansion of an already bloated cabinet, this government has come to represent the continuation of the very misgovernance that has brought South Africa to its knees. Now here, just a quick little intermission before we continue. It's very funny that Action SA makes this comment, seeing as very disappointingly, Herman Mashaba was one of the first political leaders in South Africa to call AfriForum and my Solidarity movement partners treasonous for making these exact same points against the Expropriation Act. So I don't know what's going on in Action SA. It's people within Action SA are telling me they don't even know what's going on. So take that as it falls. Some of the comments here before we continue. Wayne Sawyer says, signal and sound, 10 out of 10. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I can't hear myself, so I don't know how my sound is sounding. So if it's 10 out of 10, thank you very much. Sideliner Opinion says, greetings from the Swartland. David Suber says, watching from Pennsylvania in the United States. Thank you very much for tuning in, David, all the way from the other side of the big salty pond. Wayne Sawyer says, greetings from a farm on the mountains in the vast southmost Lowveld. Well, that's a bit closer to me than either the Swartland and the Pennsylvania. I'm here in the Highveld in Pretoria, but nice to see you're tuning in from there, Wayne. Beautiful part of the world there where you're tuning in from. De Freighter Watcher says, good evening all. Please hit the thumbs up and share this video. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Kitty Ridden says, greetings, Aaron's. Rory here. Good evening, Rory. Fantastic to see you as here as well. You and me have to have a chat later this year again. Another episode on the show, but I will get to you. Just have to get through this whirlwind of an episode. All right. Hans Couchet, sounds like a French Huguenot surname there, says, klank is piekfyn hier in Engeland. Baie dankie vir ons. Ek is bly dat dit is klink mooi. Dit klink lekker op jou oordrom aan daai kant ook. John Rudag says, good morning from San Diego. Well, thank you very much for tuning in from the US, John. Everyone's just saying where they're from. I love it. I love it. Stefan Jacob says, naand mense, ingeskakel vanuit Switserland. Aangenaam om jou hier so te sien, Stefan. Baie dankie, uitstekend. All right, let's continue. You guys can tell me where you're tuning in from. If you're also watching and it's no longer live, tell me in the comment section where you're listening from. It's always very interesting. All right. Anyway, I just had to have a little intermission there. It's ironic that Action SA is very vocally against the Expropriation Act, but also accuses AfriForum of treason for criticizing the Expropriation Act. But anyway. And I continue. For its part, the Inkatha Freedom Party, the IFP, deplored the lack of thorough consultation and vowed to oppose the law through all available avenues, including legal recourse. The phrase nil compensation was open-ended and vague, and the party warned of abuse, the arbitrary targeting of landowners under litigation framework that was highly prejudicial. The Democratic Alliance, the DA, similarly deemed the matter deeply concerning and of utmost seriousness. The legislation was a direct attack on constitutional rights and posed a grave threat. The party would not stand by and swore to fight this dangerous legislation by every possible means. Again, I have to take a little bit of an intermission there. it doesn't help that the DA then parrots this narrative of misinformation that's out there without really giving any examples of any misinformation. That was very unfortunate to see. I'm very sad to see that the DA just capitulated, jumped on that bandwagon. The misinformation, zwart gevaar, wit gevaar, misinformation gevaar. That's the new narrative. The great dissatisfaction cut across party lines, extending beyond conservative, liberal, or centrist parties, alarmed by the notion of state organs having the power to target property for expropriation on elastic public interest grounds without needing to offer anything close to market value for it. No lies detected there. Several mainstream press outlets, staffed almost entirely by left-wing editors and journalists sympathetic to collectivist retribution, attempted placatory explainers with headliners featuring phrases like "don't be alarmed" and offering reasons not to panic. Still, this potentially ruinous legislation provoked vigorous public debate despite the somewhat infirm dissent from certain quarters. There was a common understanding that the African National Congress and those within its orbit toying with African National Socialism could not be trusted. Ramaphosa had advanced the flanks of laws to centralize and entrench state power with alarming speed and stealth, startling the people, arousing within them queasy uncertainty, a sense of doom, even as if he had whispered, "Feel it. The National Democratic Revolution, it is here." Now, for those that are unaware, still by this point, the National Democratic Revolution is the ANC's formula for achieving its goals. Firstly, in order to use a combination of, in their words, race, nationalism, and socialism to further communism in the end and create the Marxist utopia. I just wanted to quickly set up a clip here before we continue, because I know later in this piece there will be a clip that is referenced, and I actually want to play the clip because the quote is not included in the piece. I would love this quote to be part of my video because it really is shocking. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. This will work. I will play this when the quote features in the piece. Before we continue, let's see here. Kale Rock says, obligatory good afternoon from Florida. Thank you very much, Kale Rocks. Or Odin. Everyone knows he's a fan favorite around these parts, so I don't think there's any confusion here. James Bowie says, hello, all from Garden Route. Fantastic. Kale Rock says, action essay is ironic and self-confused, maybe cognitive dissonance, as the Bible says, trust not in princes. Gatskop Software says, hello Arends, dankie vir alles. Dankie Gatskop dat jy ingeskakel het. Ronaldo Gous says, fuck the DA. Kale Rock says, same thing with the DA, trust not in princes. Zach Delden Ekblom says, hi. Wayne Sawyer says, the whole GNU is one party, generally known as the ANC. Fact is, as far as I'm concerned. There's too many chats. I'm not going to be able to read everyone's chats. Otherwise, we're going to just be sitting here reading chats. This is a very long piece. It's fascinating. I want to get to all of it. I'm just going to read some of the regulars. Dagbreker says, Naand Arends. Waar is jou Sky News onderhoud? Yes, so I was on Sky News Australia today to talk about race laws, farm murders, threat to private property rights in South Africa. I have sent them a message to ask for the clip so I can upload it. I will upload it on this channel as soon as I receive it from them. I will definitely share it here. So just keep an eye. Subscribe to this channel if you want to be notified when that clip is uploaded. Annette Appel says hello. Gert Jansen van Rensburg, another regular here on the channel, says, Goeienaand almal, ek het net Arends Roots en kolonel Chris Wyatt se gesprek geluister. I saw Arends was on Chris Wyatt's channel. I will definitely be listening to that on my way to work for the next few days. Sideliner Opinion says, quite a few radical pieces of legislation passed on the deathbed of the ANC. Ja, desperate katte maak desperate spronge. Let's continue. And thus the dark clouds had gathered, and beneath them South Africans were locked in their political squabble to the death. But then, on the quiet evening of Sunday, 2 February, a thunderclap rang out from the heavens. What do you guys think this is? Over in America, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, by now on a global mission to drain the swamp wherever he found it, had noticed the fight. On 2 February, he took to Truth Social and, I quote, South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. It is a bad situation that the radical left media really doesn't want to so much as mention. A massive human rights violation at a minimum is happening for all to see. The United States won't stand for it. We will act. Trump, end quote. Trump said he'd be cutting off future funding to the country until a full investigation had been completed. That investigation is still ongoing. Sometime later, reporters asked him whether he'd be cutting aid to other African nations too. He replied it was only South Africa. Quote, terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things, he said. They're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that. Terrible things are happening in South Africa, folks, and people aren't fooled by the richest 1% of white South Africans publishing photographs of their beautiful mountain views, ocean views, saying everything is fine, everything is beautiful. What are you talking about? That's also something that's been happening the past 5 weeks, but nobody's falling for it. Press coverage up until this point in the timeline had largely centered on the unraveling relations within the Government of National Unity, the GNU, by now in meltdown. Stories abounded about the mounting legal challenges alongside numerous op-eds from dissident civil society organizations, including the Institute of Race Relations, the IRR, the Free Market Foundation, the FMF, and AfriForum. But then something curious happened. Although the crowd's attention had initially been fixed on pummeling the ANC for the dire threats posed by the new law and the party's abysmal track record, somewhat abruptly, the brawlers stopped mid-fight, dazed and confused, and turned their faces elsewhere to gaze upon AfriForum. This redirection did not arise organically. It was not because the ANC had managed to convince the public of its own rectitude, nor was it because the debate over the law's merits had been settled. Instead, our reporters, rather than reporting the news, chose to manufacture it. That's a absolutely critical point that's being made there. I'm just going to repeat that. It's so well stated. Instead, our reporters, rather than reporting the news, chose to manufacture it. One of the earliest examples of this narrative being seeded, if not the first, appears to have been an interview conducted on the morning of 3 February by journalist Stephen Grootes for Newsroom Africa. The interview featured AfriForum's head of public relations, Adams van Zyl. There's a familiar name. That interview is available on my channel. If you just look on my channel, you'll see it's... I think it's titled, "You Should Be Ashamed of Yourself," in quotation marks, because that's a quote from the interview. It's one of the recent uploads on my channel. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. That's what's being talked about here. Earlier that morning, around 6:30 a.m., the organization's CEO, Kali Kriel, had responded to Trump's statement online. Kriel said that AfriForum would officially request the USA to directly punish ANC leaders and not the people of South Africa. Correct. That's been AfriForum's stance from the beginning. A lot of spin doctors out there trying to spin it as an AfriForum wants to punish South Africa. No, we just want to see the corrupt ANC leaders and those who push extremist policies squirm, and to see them feel the pain of these types of sanctions. These sanctions should be laser targeted on those extremist politicians. That's been AfriForum's mission from the start. The citizens of South Africa are already punished by the foolish and destructive policies of the ANC. They don't deserve a second punishment. Those who deserve punishment are those politicians pushing these policies. He added that ordinary citizens, there you go, same quote, are already being punished by a hostile and foolish government. Kali is completely correct. I think it was Kali that originally had that brilliant quote. I've just internalized it by now. I've been exposed as what's it called? Man, why am I blanking on this, the English of this word now? Man, it's going to bother me if I can't remember it. Plagiarizing. I've been exposed as a plagiarizer of my good colleague and friend, Kali Kriel. The interview with Van Zyl was broadcast at around 10:15 in the morning, later uploaded to YouTube. Newsroom Africa also posted the interview to its X social media profile at 1:10. The interview was one that carried more than a whiff of regime propaganda. Grootes took a combative approach in combative approach in both tone and substance. His theatrical demeanor brimmed with scathing innuendos, dismissive eye rolls, snide scoffing, smug huffing, and relentless goading, right down to jabbing a finger at the screen. He began his querulous attack by first setting a trap. He told viewers that AfriForum had lobbied Trump officials against land expropriation and viewed its campaign as a triumph. Do you believe that Trump's action stems from your organization's efforts? He asked. Van Zyl, seemingly thinking the question targeted the US president's comments on expropriation, replied that AfriForum's global network was vast and had been promptly informed when Ramaphosa signed the bill. He said he believed that AfriForum had made a massive impact. I still believe that. And yes, Marie-Louise Antoni correctly sums up that was my impression as well. When he just asked me, do you believe Trump's actions? I was genuinely believing he was talking about his post, Trump's Truth Social announcement. That was the most recent action that was being talked about. How could we be talking about the freezing of aid if that news had already broken a few days earlier and was not exclusive to South Africa? I mean, it boggles the mind, because I was just reading about how USAID's website doesn't exist anymore, and now this guy is like, is this AfriForum's fault? Zach says there's nothing groot about Stephen Grootes. Wayne says Grootes was atrocious. He really pissed me off. An IQ and inside issue there, just like his favorite ruling party. That's the other thing. I was informed afterwards. Again, it boggles the mind. I was informed after this interview that Stephen Grootes wrote like an opinion piece at the end of 2024, calling Cyril Ramaphosa. Let me just check what he called him before I quote him, because it's ridiculous, but I also don't want to attribute a fake quote to him. Grootes. Yeah. Why Cyril Ramaphosa is my person of the year? I'm just going to put this on the screen because you have to see it to believe it. Once, just give me like 1 second. I don't want to. Daily Maverick. It's just begging me. Please support us. Please, sir. Can I have a 50 cents to support independent journalism in South Africa? Goodbye. All right, just look at this. This is written by, just to prove it, look there. It's written by Stephen Grootes, quote unquote, independent journalist supreme. Why Cyril Ramaphosa is my person of the year? This guy is interviewing me as in like I'm an objective paragon of virtue and the objectivity. I'm not biased. Here's your bias, Stephen, and I don't even have to be a conspiracy theorist. I just have to like put your own words on the screen. Breaks the brain. Anyway, I've mocked Mr. Grootes now enough. Let me just put the other thing back. 1 second. There you go. Okay. I just wanted to put that out there. It really boggles the mind. Dagbreker. AfriForum have their own infinity gauntlet snapping USA away. You know, that seems to be what a lot of journalists believe. All right. Let's continue with this piece. I just wanted to share that headline. If I knew about that headline beforehand, I would have mentioned it in that interview. But yeah. As soon as the response was secured, Grootes pounced. Okay, so this money, 440 million US dollars in funding for PEPFAR for South Africans with HIV, is this the consequence you wanted? Van Zyl seemed momentarily confused. I was genuinely like stunned for a moment because either, I don't know what's worse, actually being dim or pretending to be dim on like on your own platform. That's just strange to me. Like, why would you play dumb on your own platform unless you were actually dumb? So Van Zyl seemed momentarily confused. True, no lies detected. But explained the funding freeze had no connection to AfriForum, pointing instead to an earlier global executive order by Trump. Yeah. Undeterred, Grootes dismissed this explanation and pressed on. You're playing a very dangerous game here, he charged. Later, he doubled down several times more, insisting that the loss of funding for people living with HIV was a direct result of your work. Once Van Zyl dismissed the accusations, prompting Grootes to shift gears and wield the familiar weapon of racism, citing Trump's remarks about the government treating certain classes of people very badly. Grootes suggested Trump was dog whistling to his base and pressed Van Zyl to clarify who he meant. Van Zyl outlined the government's numerous violations of individual rights and discrimination against minorities, but Grootes snapped, you seem to be a little nervous about using the phrase white people. Why don't you just say it, Adams? Well, just to, again, pause before I continue. Because it isn't just white people in South Africa that are the victims of these destructive policies and discriminatory laws. The white minority is in particular the target of these race laws, these discriminatory laws. But that doesn't mean that they are the exclusive target of these race laws. To say that it's only white people that are being targeted would be a lie. It would be misinformation. The very thing that Grootes is like, oh, you should not be spreading misinformation. So I'm adding the necessary nuance, and he's like, why don't you just say it? It's white people. I'm literally doing what you are demanding that I do, is not spread misinformation. And then when I don't spread misinformation, you're like, you should be spreading misinformation. Hindo says 56 likes. Thank you very much. We're almost at 100 viewers. That's fantastic. That's very good. All right, let's continue. It's a long piece. For much of the remaining interview, Grootes downplayed the risks of the Expropriation Act, insisting that all the neutral lawyers he consulted saw no problem with it. He deceptively compared the new law to expropriation laws in the United States, as if there was no crucial difference. That's another lie that's just so lazy, where the two ones that are so lazy, where the propagandists are like, but other countries have expropriation laws as well. Why would you be against the South African expropriation law? Because the South African expropriation law enables expropriation without compensation. A country like the United States, the government can expropriate property, but it can't just take your property without compensation. If it wants to build a highway through your farm, it has to compensate you for that property. It's such a dishonest lie, and it's a lie that's only believed by, and I'm sorry to be this derogatory, but like by people that don't think critically. If you think critically for like 5 seconds, you realize, but there's a substantial difference between this expropriation law and the laws that you find in other countries. You can just look it up. It's the easiest thing. Just literally Google like expropriation law, United States, eminent domain, and on Wikipedia, it's like there has to be fair compensation paid. The other lie that's also on par is the lie that which one was it? The South African government blocking Starlink in South Africa because it doesn't meet the race criteria of the country is the same as the United States wanting to block TikTok because it's not sufficiently US owned. The US policy is not racially discriminatory. I mean, there's a conversation to be had about policies that mandate a certain percentage of people in that host country owning an international company that wants to do business there. But that's not what's happening with Starlink. It's not that it has to be 30% South African owned. It's that it has to be 30% specific racial category owned, 30% black owned. That's the problem. That is racially discriminatory. Anyway. Let's read some of the comments before I continue. Michael Venter sê, dit was 'n baie goeie meningsstuk deur Marie-Louise, regtig goed. Grootes en span het jou in 'n hinderlaag gelei en hy behoort homself te skaam, soos ek jou gesê het. Ek is egter steeds moedig vir jou baas. Yeah, well, if there's anything that you're moedig about with Kali Kriel, I mean, there's something that you have a criticism of what stance that he took or action that AfriForum made. I mean, you can send me an email at arends.vansale. It's reading it like a website. arends.vansale, one word, at afriforum.co.za. You'll find it on my email address on my YouTube channel as well. AfriForum really does value constructive criticism, but not hysterical criticism, like baseless criticism. Nina says, condescending comments by Pieter de Tooy about the AfriForum Solidarity Force. I like that. The AfriForum and Solidarity for the AfriForum and Solidariteit 4. Trip to the US is not commendable. Pieter and News 24 overrated. I completely agree. I am officially blocked by the News 24 official X account because I asked them the simple question of whether there will be any repercussions for the journalists at their publication for trying to destroy the life of Rian Braai based on a racism hoax. When I asked that simple question, I was blocked by News 24. Kale Rocks, USA has eminent domain. Yeah, they forcibly take your property, but will pay you. That's the crux. Like, AfriForum doesn't have a problem with expropriation with compensation. Our problem is with expropriation without compensation. As long as you are being compensated fairly for your property, there's an argument to be made. Stefani Stilianu says, Arends, you are phenomenal in interviews. I love watching you take the liars on. Thank you very much, Stephanie. I appreciate it. Aaron says, lekker Arends, ek het ook hierdie stuk gelees, dankbaar vir julle goeie werk, hou so voort. Baie dankie, Aaron. Dagbreaker, Starlink isn't banned because he isn't black. Then they proceed to kick out the cricket team. Yeah, that happened yesterday. A professional South African cricket team were kicked out of a tournament and fined because their team was too white. Don't believe me? Go check, read the story yourself. I've linked it on my X account. It's bonkers. It's race madness. Beaver says, good evening all. 68 likes. Thank you very much, Hendo. All right, let's continue. As I said, there's still a lot of this piece to go. It should be noted that prior to the media intervention, responses from government officials and the ANC to Trump's statements were subdued, expressed in restrained and neutral language. Ramaphosa, for instance, at 9:42 that morning, addressed Trump publicly on social media in measured, respectable tone, seeking engagement and making no mention of AfriForum. Even as the pressure mounted when Elon Musk reposted Ramaphosa's statement and pointedly asked, why do you have openly racist ownership laws? No lies detected. Presidency spokesperson Vincent Mangwenya on social media at 10:50 in the morning pleaded for constructive dialogue. You can see his post there. I'm just going to read what his response to Elon was. But for those that are listening that don't view the video, my brother, you would know that owing to a devastating legacy of centuries of oppressive and brutal colonialism and apartheid, our constitution provides for redressing racially discriminatory policies, the ills of the past. You have his number. We started the dialogue, so let's continue talking constructively. End quote. Back at the studio, though, Grootes wasn't ready to call it a day. Later that morning, he welcomed Brooks Spector, associate editor at Daily Maverick, that I just showed you now, and former U.S. diplomat to discuss, Trump's statements. As Spector turned to PEPFAR aid, Grootes jumped in, highlighting AfriForum's earlier appearance on the show. He said, and I quote, they sort of claim credit for this in a way, for bringing the issue up to President Donald Trump. I don't want to speak for them. Yeah, you could have AfriForum speak for themselves by having us part of this conversation, but no, that would be too uncomfortable and inconvenient for your narrative. But certainly they were the ones in 2018, we know, who spoke to some of the people in the Trump administration at the time. Could AfriForum have been an important factor in all of this? I mean, it would kind of fit nicely into Trump's worldview. Let me put it like. What? Let me put it like. That's a weird turn of phrase. End quote. Later that day, presidency spokesperson Mangwenya also appeared on Newsroom Africa. His interview was scheduled for 1 in the afternoon, meaning his remarks followed AfriForum's earlier slot. This time, journalist Michelle Craig took the helm, hosting under the title Presidency Responds to Trump's Tweet, AfriForum Claims. Unlike the earlier confrontation, there were no petty antagonisms here. The news anchor remained calm and courteous, fostering a warm rapport with the government official. Several times, Craig alternated between the casual Vincent and the more formal Mr. Mangwenya, noting that when it came to Vincent or Mr. Mangwenya, it was always a pleasure to have him on the show. Yeah, when an AfriForum representative goes on the show, it's like, why are you a horrible human being? Why are you human scum? Why are you this hateful piece of garbage? When an ANC official goes on, oh, well, thank you very much for all the amazing things you guys do. So I saw it happen. Like, while I was part of an interview, I was on, I can't remember the radio station. I was on some radio, like a big radio station, and I was talking about AfriForum stances, and the host was incredibly like vicious and antagonistic and attacking, like, why are you like this? Why is AfriForum doing these evil things? Why are you lying? Why are you misrepresenting the facts? And then halfway, I was booked for a 5-minute interview, and it was an ambush interview because it wasn't just a 5-minute interview. It was 20 minutes, firstly, of me being berated and attacked by the host. And then halfway through, they're like, we're going to go to a commercial break. After this commercial break, we will be listening to, who was the ANC official? Lindiwe Zulu from the ANC to give their side of the story. You stay tuned. So I'm still part of the conversation. Lindiwe Zulu, ANC cadre, comes on the show. And the host is like, Mrs. Zulu, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for giving us the time of day. Can you set the record straight? AfriForum is making all these claims. Can you tell us the real truth? Give us the facts. I'm just sitting there. I'm still on the line. I'm waiting for my opportunity to respond, but it feels like fake. It feels like I'm on like some dystopian radio station where the state-sponsored radio station is just like rubbing the state full of honey, smearing them with honey, and I'm just being hit with like vinegar and chilies. Anyway, we'll get to that part a little bit later on how the media treats the South African government. Vincent, or rather Mr. Mangwenya, was given free rein to make several claims, none of which met the slightest challenge from the journalist. When Mr. Mangwenya said the Constitution offered ample safeguards against any arbitrary sorts of expropriation, let alone confiscation, Craig did not ask how the new framework aligned with these protections, nor inquire, for example, about the elasticity of the term public interest. When he touted the bill's passage through public consultation, she did not ask about why other parties had raised their disputes. That's the other thing, is when it comes to like the ANC saying, well, we would never expropriate people's property, their private property. In the same breath, they're like praising Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe as a hero. It boggles the mind. Again, it's like, they're like, we deeply respect private property rights, but also Robert Mugabe and ZANU-PF of Zimbabwe were like heroes of the revolution. Fantastic guys. Doesn't fill you with a lot of reassurances. When Mr. Mangwenya insisted the laws does not target private properties, and it does not do so in any arbitrary sort of manner, the journalist remained silent. And when Mr. Mangwenya asserted that South Africa was not doing anything different from the US, Craig did not probe. Instead, she helpfully interjected, and in other countries, never asking him to explain the key differences between the American system and this new legislation. Most striking of all, throughout the exchange, the terms nil or without compensation didn't feature once. It was Craig who then turned the spotlight to AfriForum. There's a lot of fear-mongering, though, Mr. Mangwenya, she said, singling out the organization. Mr. Mangwenya responded, you have right-wing organizations such as AfriForum who have no best interest for this country. AfriForum had continuously advocated against all transformative actions. AfriForum does advocate against racially discriminatory policies, no lies detected there, taken by the government to redress the ills of the past, to redress the centuries of brutal colonialism and apartheid. And AfriForum has gone around the world, quite frankly, spreading lies about the country. they've not been able to substantiate with any evidence all the claims they've made. No, Mr. Mangwenya, it's you that can't substantiate your claims of misinformation and lies. Look, like, again here, perfect example. He has ample time. He has like a massive paragraph there, but no, like, not a single evidence of a lie, not one lie example even being given. It's just like misinformation, like a magic word, like a spell that he casts. Just 1 second. So yeah, it's a funny world we live in. Right, let's continue. Mr. Mangwenya urged the media to be circumspect in dealing with such organizations. We have to continuously call out organizations such as AfriForum, he said, and reject their racist-based advocacy. No, Mr. Mangwenya, you are the representative of a government with 140 plus race laws on the books. You are the racist-based advocacy group. He labeled the situation a very unfortunate case of misinformation and deliberate distortion. There again, that misinformation, like a spell. When I say misinformation, that means you can't criticize me. That's the spell. The journalist then steered the conversation back to PEPFAR. However, Mr. Mangwenya confirmed that Grootes had missed and Van Zyl, what Mr. had missed and Van Zyl had tried to convey. Prior to this announcement by President Trump, PEPFAR had already been suspended, he said. See, here the government spokesperson admits that it's not AfriForum's fault. He admits that they know USAID was cancelled before the announcement that when Donald Trump made the post about South Africa. See, they know. They know. It's all documented. They think they can get away with it. Mangwenya's interview aired at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Sometime before 2 o'clock, the African National Congress issued a press statement. Outlets like EWN then eagerly reported that some news had just come in. The ANC has blamed lobby group AfriForum for fueling a racist misrepresentation of the country's land reform programs. The ANC statement was written under the screaming headline, I'm not going to scream it, but it is a screaming headline. AfriForum's racist agenda fuels misinformation on South Africa's land reform. True to form, the party took shelter behind the familiar shield of racism. Indeed, the racism angle was invoked 3 times, mentioning a racist agenda, racist narratives, and racist distortions. ANC national spokesperson Malengi Bengu Motsiri bitterly denounced what she called AfriForum's fear-mongering, divisive agenda, and misinformation campaign. The party said that Trump's social media post was a direct result of the organization's efforts to mislead the global community and protect apartheid-era land ownership patterns. No, AfriForum's message is just, don't confiscate people's private property, you tyrants. Later that afternoon at 5:15, Newsroom Africa then aired an interview with the ANC's Deputy Secretary General and Chairperson of the International Relations, Mvula Mokonyane. Host Zolem Gambe opened the segment by stating that suspension of aid would be a topic of discussion and the ANC was blaming lobby group AfriForum for the misinformation on land expropriation. The introduction is quite clear, Mugambi remarked. You blame AfriForum. To his credit, he posed at least one tough question. What did she think about AfriForum's preference for ANC leaders to be punished? Mokonyane, implicated in serious corruption allegations by the Zondo State Capture Commission, replied, that's very racist of them, very reactionary of them, very unpatriotic. That's the other thing. The ANC genuinely views themselves as the country. Any criticism of the ANC is criticism of South Africa. Any attack against the ANC is attack against South Africa. For Mokonyane, AfriForum had to be known for what they are, racist, unpatriotic, very selfish. On the other hand, she viewed the DA as very patriotic. Well, doesn't that tell you everything? The ANC is praising the DA as very patriotic. Take that, make of that what you will. Because the party considered Donald Trump's statements to be misconceptions. When pressed on the ANC's track record of gross mismanagement over the past 30 years, Mokonyane acknowledges these challenges, but she also stressed that it was quite important to appreciate that the Land Act, the NHI, the Bella Act were all signed under the GNU. True. It was Mugambe then who floated the idea of treason charges. He had seen Action SA's Herman Mashaba post about it online. Mokonyane replied that the ANC's immediate position was that AfriForum must be known for who they are, They're racists. They are people who cannot be trusted. They are not patriots. He said, in any case, it was not timelessly for the ANC to consider treason charges because they know it's complete nonsense. They know it would be a humiliating thing to try. But now there is a treason investigation into AfriForum. Yeah, that's what's going on. Over treason for telling the truth. Treason is truth is treason in an empire of lies. The quote goes. Over the next 3 weeks, AfriForum found itself under relentless attack from both the media and the broader political establishment. In the immediate aftermath, numerous articles covered the organization's plea for the US president to rather punish ANC leaders directly, but many others reflected a shift in the prevailing mood. One IOL headline captured it well: organizations gang up on AfriForum over lobbying Trump on land. News 24 editor Adrian Basson likewise distilled the intellectual zeitgeist in an article headlined, "Trump the liar has touched South Africa on its studio." And I quote, please don't attribute this quote to me. This is Adrian Basson talking. US President Donald Trump's barefaced lie. I'm going to have to read it in a funny voice because it would be my nightmare for this quote to be attributed to me. US President Donald Trump's barefaced lie that South Africa is confiscating land has ironically united the country across racial lines and cultural lines, Basson claimed. His hateful messages falsely accusing the country of land grabs led to a united chorus across color, ideological, and party lines of South Africans telling him to back off, he fumed. You see why I want to do everything in my power to ensure that embarrassing quote is not attributed to me, or like the clip is taken out of context, that it looks like I'm saying that. You see what I mean? Irrespective of who the fringe characters are that successfully managed to infiltrate his erratic brain, Trump should have known better than to spew misinformation about South Africa. Again, reading it in a funny voice just to ensure no one attributes that horrendous quote to me. The narrative against AfriForum was then further embroidered by many of the country's editors and commentators. News 24's assistant editor, Peter de Tooy, for example, penned an article titled, "How AfriForum Pulled SA into Trump's Maelstrom of Irrationality and Extortion." He followed his initial salvo with another piece. South Africans have, at Donald Trump's ear, the PayPal mafia, golfers, and an alt-right editor. Alt-right, as if he feels like I've been thrusted into a time machine and transported back to like 2018. Meanwhile, Daily Maverick editor Mariam Tam weighed in with Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and AfriForum, an unholy trinity pushing back on land reform. For Vrye Weekblad, now discontinued, rest in peace. Piet Kroukamp noted that hatred towards Trump and AfriForum had become rampant due to the suspension of aid. Trump may talk rubbish, but AfriForum helps ensure the fallout is serious. On 7 February, tensions surged with the release of Trump's executive order, sending the press into overdrive. Struggling journalists. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I read that as struggling journalists. I'm sorry. Struggle journalist Max Duprier launched something of a media blitzkrieg, appearing in numerous broadcast interviews, amongst others on RSG, Cape Talk, Newsroom Africa, and ENCA, and writing several articles. There was genuinely a Freudian slip. I didn't intend to say that. In one, he grumbled that Afrikaners were once again pariahs in their own land and skunks. Many journalists scoffed at the executive order's resettlement provision, ridiculing the idea and betting online that not a single Afrikaner would accept it. Yet, almost overnight, around 20,000 inquiries overwhelmed the South African Chamber of Commerce in the United States, crashing its email server. Also, please don't email the South African Chamber of Commerce in the United States at your own risk. Just last week, this organization appeared to use the many thousands of Afrikaners that had inquired with them, used that data, those email addresses that they had gathered through those inquiries, to send out anti-AfriForum propaganda. And this South African Chamber of Commerce in the United States is presidented by a member of the ANC called Neil Diamond. He takes pictures in his ANC jersey constantly. So you can email them at your own risk. Just know that they have your data and will use it however they want, and they have used it quite nefariously, it seems, in the past week. During a Cape Talk interview with a giggling John Matham, who kicked off his show with a jaunty rhyme, Afrikaner, fraught banana. Okay, I don't get the joke. Dupree sourly wagered, not one is a successful farmer, not one has a proper job. So these are peripheral figures, people who are struggling. The broad consensus then among South Africa's intelligentsia and political elite was that Trump's stance on the country and the nature of the Expropriation Act stemmed from misconceptions mainly attributable to AfriForum and its global awareness campaigns. Yet, amidst the relentless clamor over misinformation, disinformation, distortions, untruths, lies, rubbish, falsehoods, and fearmongering, scarcely a word was said about what this alleged misunderstanding involved, nor was there any real attempt to define or substantiate what this supposed misinformation really was. That's the crux. The crux of the complaint seemed to hinge on Trump's use of the present tense is confiscating. The argument being that the South African government hadn't yet got around to physically seizing land under the new law, and so this claim was false. However, it was largely a matter of semantics. The reality is that a law is now on the statute books after years of ANC and other Black African nationalists pushing for it, providing the liberation movement with a legal instrument through which it can confiscate property on racial grounds. Exactly. The process had now been set in motion, even if it may still take years before it fully plays itself out. The Group Areas Act, to use an analogy from South Africa's own past, was passed in 1950, but the most notorious forced removals only occurred years and sometimes decades later. The appropriate time to move to a country to counter a human rights violation, property rights being an essential human right, is while it is happening, and the earlier the better, not after the fact. Those who champion rights usually understand this distinction clearly. In scenarios perhaps closer to their sensitivities, they'd likely have no hesitation in supporting a present tense outcry dominating global headlines. In any case, mass land invasions had long marked South Africa's landscape, with politicians openly urging their followers to seize land, while the state largely looks the other way, leaving owners with little choice but to abandon their properties. Incidentally, abandoned property is one specific instance where the state can offer no compensation under the new law. Perhaps the most galling aspect, though, was the lack of generosity in interpreting Trump's statement, one that firmly backed the South African people against their rapacious leaders bent on grabbing what they could as their grip on power weakens. Right, just a quick little break. I'm going to read some comments before we continue. Man, there's a lot of comments. I'll read as many as I can. Orenel says, Trump het hierdie ding perfek gespeel, tesame met julle by AfriForum en Solidariteit, deurdat Trump vroeg nadat die wet deur die president onderteken is, beswaar te maak die klok te lui. Baie dankie, Oren, ek is bly. Who would have thought that being an AfriForum member would make you a dissonant? You probably mean a dissident. Let's see here. Jesse Randolph says, evening everyone. Hello, Jesse. Would be a good idea not to call someone a bad person if you need their money. Kailrock says, Bason is what happens when the kid that reminds the teacher to take homework grows up and gets a job. Good evening, everyone. I'm a bit late to the party today. Hello, Emery. He's tuning in all the way from Turkey. Struggling journalist. It was a genuine mistake, but I mean, man, I should compose myself. Oh, man. Nina says, wie noem homself nou Neil Diamond? Daar's net een Neil Diamond, Sweet Caroline. Ja, wel, ek dink is nogal vreemd as Neil Diamond homself, hierdie Neil Diamond nou nie die sanger nie. Hy stel homself voor en elke keer as hy homself voorstel moet hy vir mense duidelik maak. Nee, nie die sanger nie, die pop van die ANC, daai Neil Diamond. En as mense sê, ek weet wie hy is. Ja, truth is treason in an empire of lies. Naand Erns, Dian Veldhuizen sê, naand Erns, julle doen baie goeie werk, ons saak is edel en diegene wat teen julle is en ons teen ons en julle is in die minderheid en ons weet hulle is besig om te verloor. Baie dankie, Dian, absoluut die waarheid. Hendo says, 89 likes, fantastic. We're going to finish this piece here tonight, so let's continue. I think this is the third yes, it's the third and final part of the piece, third act. Aside from general denouncements of the alleged misinformation, the three main allegations against AfriForum were that the organization sought to, one, sought to achieve trade consequences, specifically South Africa's withdrawal from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, international sanctions, and third, the suspension of aid funding. These allegations were false. The organization's international campaigns primarily centered on raising awareness and exerting policy pressure while consistently supporting trade, investment, and measures to foster the country's growth and prosperity. Regarding its position on AGOA, more specifically, an online newsletter dated 2019 concerning a campaign tour to the United States, for example, stated, AfriForum is in favor of AGOA and sees it as a beneficial to South Africa. The civil rights organization is therefore not in the USA to encourage withdrawal from the agreement, but rather to act preventatively to avoid such a crisis. As for sanctions, a site search for the organization's English and Afrikaans websites and available online materials for the term sanctions or sancties do not appear to yield results, with the notable exception of the recent statement released after Trump's latest comments, calling the ANC leaders to be targeted directly and ordinary citizens be spared. Finally, the claim that AfriForum was behind the slashing of PEPFAR's aid was a blatant fabrication. The aid freeze stemmed from a sweeping executive order by Trump, dated 20 January, which paused nearly all US foreign aid. Far from being confined to South Africa, it fell under Trump's America First agenda to prioritize American interests and reassess all American foreign aid spending. Once South African public sentiment had turned against AfriForum, forcing the organization to scramble with press conferences, international publications piled into the fray. AfriForum were blamed for the aid cuts. The risk of the Expropriation Act were downplayed, and though it was explained that should racial confiscations occur, these would be entirely justified. It's not happening, but if it were, it would be a good thing. That type of thing. Those calling for an end to race-based laws and the end to violent attacks on people in their homes were branded lunatic, fringe, far-right, extremist, white supremacists who peddled in white victimhood and conspiracy theories. Spoiler alert, white people can be victims. That doesn't mean we have a victim mentality. Just noting that white people can be victims of government policies, can be victims of crime, can be victims of hate crimes, can be victims of torture. This does not mean you have a victim mentality. Victim mentality is when you want to go to the ICC about like a shampoo advert that was racist. That's a victim mentality, not saying, hey, don't chant about murdering us. Calling a TV advert like a crime against humanity, or calling a TV advert a human rights violation, that's a victim mentality. Not saying, hey, don't steal my property because I'm white. The claim that AfriForum promoted the white genocide theory popped up again in numerous reports, despite numerous past press ombudsman rulings, press council rulings, that such claims were entirely false. In an article in The Guardian on AfriForum titled White Supremacists in Suits and Ties, the right-wing Afrikaner group in Trump's ear, Chris McGreal, falsely asserted that this Afrikaner group had promoted white genocide conspiracy theories in its campaigning over the years. After the cauldron of contempt had been brought to a boiling point by this sort of highly inflammatory and propagandistic reporting, calls intensified for the Solidarity movement leaders to be charged with treason. These demands came from various political parties, including Action SA, the Good Party, the EFF, and the MK Party. The ANC, however, opted not to lay charges itself, choosing a different approach instead. Quote, "We call on all South Africans to isolate these right-wing racists," national spokesperson Mlengi Bengu Motsiri said. "Individual citizens do, though, have the right to lay charges against them. The ANC will be loath to waste valuable time needed to address national challenges or to make these racists into martyrs by government charging them." On 3 March, the policy duly announced that 4 dockets for treason on 3 March, the police duly announced that 3 dockets for treason had been opened, with Minister Senzo Mchunu the Minister of Police, stating that the following day, the police's crimes against the state unit was taking the case very seriously. And no, it's also a lie that the ANC has not accused AfriForum of treason. They ANC MPs have I'm losing the word now, the translated word in my head. The ANC MPs have accused AfriForum of treason. That's a fact. On the South African broadcast media, some talking heads struggled to contain their delight at this development. There was show after show of giddy interviewers asking lawyers, politicians, and other public figures what they deemed the appropriate punishment for the alleged misinformation, their views on treason, and the likelihood of such charges sticking. Conclusion. Under ANC rule, the South African sections of the media have a long and unfortunate history of targeting citizens who speak out against race-based policies or violent crime, with some commentators seeing their role in such situations as regime attack dogs rather than watchdogs against the abuse of power. Damn, that's such a good sentence. It sums it up so brilliantly. I'm going to read it again. Under ANC rule, the South African sections of the media have a long and unfortunate history of targeting citizens who speak out against race-based policies or violent crime, with some commentators seeing their role in such situations more as regime attack dogs rather than watchdogs against the abuse of power. In this recent episode, the efforts proved so effective that during a Newsroom Africa interview, Minister in the Presidency, Kumbutso Ntshavheni, even gave such elements in the media a biscuit and pat on the head as thanks for their support. I want to play you that clip because people will not believe me when I tell them that the South African government thanked the media for helping push their narrative. Let's watch that clip before we continue reading. Share screen. There we go. Can you see there? Yes. Okay. Let's play that clip.
Is it AfriForum or Solidariteit? So if the red carpet is there, I must see that photo. But we appreciate that the media and the international community are exposing the lies instead of ourselves speaking up, defending ourselves. We appreciate that. Is it AfriForum or?
Okay. Did you guys, did that clip sound work? I mean, nothing says independent journalism like the government thanking you for your service. All right, let's continue. The piece is almost done. All right. Okay. Let's continue. Yet, having engineered the media frenzy that emboldened the ANC-dominated state to pursue these charges, it is important to take a step back and consider that exactly the journalists and commentators responsible, local and foreign, what they have accomplished. Treason, like murder, has historically been considered a capital crime. And even after the abolition of the death penalty attracts similar prison sentences, we now have leaders of one of the country's most important and representative civil society movements facing potential life sentences for raising valid and legitimate concerns abroad and essentially saying that the liberation movement needs to be taken at its word on the land question and similar matters. Though the case against the Solidarity and AfriForum leaders is risible, South Africa's judiciary has become increasingly politicized over recent years, with the courts repeatedly failing to apply the law fairly and impartially in racially charged cases. Thanks to the information warfare unleashed against AfriForum by the local and international media, a precedent has now been set that the state can go after you for valid and accurate criticism of the racial nationalism of the regime. The liberty and civility of our multiracial democracy has therefore been severely eroded, and the door opened to even more authoritarian abuses of power. It's such a fantastic piece. Well done to Marie-Louise Antoni for this absolutely phenomenal piece. Go to that, just search Politicsweb, the information war against AfriForum. If you want to do me a massive favor, share that piece on WhatsApp, X, Facebook, everywhere. Share this piece. It is such a good piece. So much effort has gone into it. It deserves to be shared far and wide. Thank you very much to everyone that shared it already. Okay. All right. There's some comments here. 101 likes. Thank you very much. There's actually a lot of comments. Let me see. Man. All right. Emery says, it's okay. There are a lot of struggling journalists around these days. Their funding was cut recently. Ja, the Vrije Weekblad, Max du Preez's publication, promptly closed after US aid funding had stopped to South Africa. Really activates those almonds. Really makes you think. Mercedes says, hello, Arends. Heinrich Visser says, no, almal, yeah, that human chapter, just says thinking. Sideliner opinion says mainstream media all over the Western world is controlled by a few powerful globalist individuals, therefore they all sing from the same hymn book. Virgilia Australis says, ek luister vanaf Stilbaai in die Suid-Kaap, fantasties, pragtige deel van die wêreld daai ook. Endo says 101 likes, thank you very much. Kiani says, maak die like knoppie groen, is en druk hom. Yeah, thank you very much. If you like this type of content, you can subscribe as well for more. I don't usually just read essays or opinion pieces. I usually interview people or do analysis on my own. But this piece was too good. I had to share it on as many platforms as possible. Sideline opinion says, these treason charges are the same as the fake Russian collusion charges the left Dems laid against Trump. Very good point. Emery says, turns out Arends is the only person in the world using the light theme for X. Yeah. Lowbrow Mkati says, nee man, late again. I'll have to catch it on demand. Alles van die beste, Roykat en almal. Tot ziens. Of ja, goeienaand. En ja, het sal maar later om het van die begin af kyk. Dagbreker says, Politicsweb has been on fire these past week on their X profile. Well, on that note, I want to say, out of the alternative media sphere in South Africa, Politicsweb, humble little Politicsweb, has been a tour de force. They have been fantastic in the past five weeks to combat the ANC's propaganda machine and to expose the National Democratic Revolution and expose the lies of the ANC. They've been doing fantastic work. I'm a proud donating member and subscriber to Politicsweb. Please go support them, support this amazing initiative, real investigative journalism from South Africa. Really, really, really good platform. Wel gedaan, James Meiberg. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's episode. Thank you very much for everyone that tuned in. Thank you for everyone again from the bottom of my Afrikaner heart for standing with AfriForum and the Solidarity movement in this trying time where the entire ANC propaganda machine was targeting AfriForum and the Solidarity movement. We really appreciate it. And the wheat was separated from the chaff these past 4 weeks. We saw which organizations and individuals will stand for what is right, even when it is incredibly difficult and when it is incredibly unpopular to do so, and those who only stand up for what is right when it serves them. It's that old Afrikaner poem from C.A. Langenhoven of give me a man who says what is true, even when he says what is true and sticks to his own conscience and is loyal to his conscience, even if he receives punishments instead of reward. Gee my 'n man wat sê wat waar is as die duiwel daar is, wat doen wat reg is as die regter weg is, en wat getrou tot sy gewete bly as hy self straf in plaas van beloning kry. One of my favorite poems. It's printed on and in a frame on my desk at work at AfriForum, so I always remember. Sideliner opinion says, I can strongly recommend Politicsweb for South African news. I'm going to put that on the, I can't show them enough. It's just such a good platform. I'm a massive fan. So let me just put that on the screen because I have to, because they don't get the recognition that they deserve. www.politicsweb.co.za. I fully endorse this publication. Go support them. Become a subscriber there. It is definitely worth your while. Follow them on X as well. Kale Rock says, even if it were treason, and it is not, there is such a thing as good treason. See the American Revolution and, ironically, the fight against apartheid. It's what MP van Wyk Lou, the Afrikaner philosopher, called loyale verzet, loyal resistance. When you are resisting the status quo because it's the right thing to do, because you want to save what you love, not because you want to destroy what you hate. And I'm going to end on that note. Thank you very much for everyone that tuned in. Thank you for all your comments and questions. Thank you for everyone that liked. And if you're watching and it's no longer live, leave a comment in the comment section. I read all of them, appreciate all of them. And if you like this type of analysis and news out of South Africa, but discussions that will remain relevant far into the future, I hope, you can subscribe to this channel. And I really appreciate it. David Suber says, thanks, Arends. Dagbreker says, thank you, Arends. Great show. Kyle Rocks, great show. Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate it. And lastly, share this episode on far and wide on all your social media. I really appreciate it. When you share, tag me in that post so I can see you sharing these shows. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we're going to win. We just have to stick to it. It's a storm out there, but our ship is sturdy, even though it is rocking at times. So cheers, guys. Have a good one. And also, before I forget, monetization is not on this channel, so you can't give super chats. But if you really want to give money somewhere, you can become an AfriForum member. Link in the description to support AfriForum. Use that link to become a member of AfriForum. That's a worthy cause for your money. Much better than just giving me money. I'd rather have you give money to AfriForum to support a good cause. All right. Cheers, guys. Have a good one. God bless. Stay safe.